This is a quick tutorial to show you some techniques you'll use to create your clay slab landscape designs. A slab of clay is a piece that's been made flat by rolling. A coil is created by rolling out a long, pliable cylinder shape with the clay. Let's first start with some of our tools and accessories that we'll need. We have our clay mat, which protects the table when we cut our slabs. We have a rolling pin and some dowel rods to ensure even clay rolling. There's a needle tool, which works really well for cutting and scratching into the clay's surface. Please be really careful and make safe choices with your needle tool because it's pretty sharp. So next we have water and a sponge for smoothing, a toothbrush for texturing the clay when we join pieces, and a variety of other fun tools to add texture and detail. But what's the deal with clay anyway? How does it get from an unformed lump into a finished art piece? First comes the plastic stage. This is the stage where you can sculpt and form your clay into a shape. When you let the clay dry and firm up a bit, it turns into a stage called leather hard. You can carve and further sculpt it. It's not fully dry yet. When all the water has evaporated out of the clay, that's called the bone dry stage. But your vessel isn't ready to be used yet. It needs to go into the kiln. In the kiln is where the clay gets fired, and it changes from that bone dry stage into something called bisqueware. The kiln heats up to about 1900 degrees Fahrenheit to fire the clay into bisqueware. After the bisque firing, glaze can be applied to a ceramic piece to create a colorful and shiny finish. After the glaze is applied, the piece has to go back into the kiln for another firing, and then the art piece is complete. When you get your clay slab, you might notice the color of the clay isn't super even, and that's okay. It's a normal effect when the clay just sits around in storage for a little while. Begin by using the rolling pin to flatten and roll your slab. Make sure your rolling pin is cleanish. It shouldn't have bits of dried up clay stuck to it. Those will get smushed into your piece. It's a good idea to stand for the rolling process as it gives you more leverage. Use the dowel rods to achieve the right, even thickness of your slab, and turn your clay as you're working. Your two dowel rods should be touching the rolly part of the rolling pin at all times. Give the rolling pin a little tap, and when you hear the clink clink sound of the pin touching the dowels, you'll know your clay is the right thickness. I'm going to make sure my clay looks smooth and not lumpy like it looked when I first started rolling. Next, decide what shape you want your slab landscape to be. You can keep it kind of freeform or cut out a shape with your needle tool. Using the needle tool for cutting will give you temporary raggedy edges, but that's okay. You'll smooth them out later. You can cut a shape out of paper and use the paper as a stencil for this as well, if you'd like. If you have extra clay from cutting out your slab shape, set it aside and plan to use it for your coils. Do not, I repeat, do not smush and scrunch it all up into a ball, stack the extra pieces on top of each other and then mush them together, and so on. This will create air bubbles, which, if water or moisture gets trapped inside, can cause the clay pieces to explode during the kiln firing, which will ruin your work and potentially the work of your classmates too. Here's a little bit of science fun for you. When the kiln temperature rises, any trapped air pockets fill with water vapor, which builds pressure as water turns to steam. The pressure of the steam causes the clay to explode from the inside. There's always a chance that something can go wrong during the bisque firing process, so keep that in mind as you are working. Now flip that slab over and write your first name, last initial, and your class code towards the bottom of the back of your slab. Find your class code written on the board. I wound up writing my name example a little too high up. You'll see why in a second. Use your needle tool gently. Don't press too hard or else you'll go straight through your clay slab. Now we're going to make a little indentation so that your landscape piece can be hung on a little nail on the wall after it's fired and glazed and all complete. Take a clay tool with a flat edge, push it gently into the clay, and then drag it downwards. If it makes you nervous to do this on your own, I can come around and help you if you need it. Next, you can flip your slab over again and use the sponge and water cup to smooth out any uneven edges on your slab. First, decide on what you'll show in your landscape. Will you incorporate linear perspective with converging lines and a vanishing point? Atmospheric perspective with mountains fading into the distance? Maybe a tree in the foreground? It's totally up to you. Now comes the coil fun. To start your coil, break off a piece of clay and roll it out on the table between your hands. Your clay mat won't be big enough to do all the work, so you can use the bare table surface. We'll clean up afterwards. Here are some different types of coils you can use in your artwork. Spirals, arches, twists, braids, folds, donuts, and spheres. As you're working, you can have a composition idea in mind already. Maybe you even did a sketch, or you can kind of design it as you go. When it's time to attach your pieces, we'll use a score and slip process using a toothbrush and water. Scoring means making small cuts in the clay, and slip is watered down clay that acts as a bonding component to join two pieces of clay. The toothbrush process we'll use combines these two steps into one. Wet the toothbrush and use the bristles to gently rough up the clay's surface. You can do this to the piece you're joining as well, and then gently press both pieces together. Keep working to fill your slab with different types of coils that can show a landscape. You can even use other tools to add texture to your slab surface. Make sure that any coils you make aren't too much thicker than the width of a thumb. If you notice your clay cracking a bit as you're shaping it, don't worry, you can smooth it with a sponge and some water later on. When it's time to stop and clean up, you might not be totally done with your design, and that's okay. We will have the next class period to work on this as well. When it's time to stop for the day, flip your piece over and make sure that your name and your class code are still readable before you put it on your table's tray. I can't wait to see what awesome clay landscapes you create.